again, depending on the type of use. So if we install them tomorrow, best hopes you'd get 8 years out of it.
Just not a question, just a comment then that really speaks to the concern of both clubs, I guess, with the distraction of the lines, those extra lines there. We'd be stuck with that for some time. And one of the major concerns of the tennis club is the distraction that these extra lines have. So we would then, this would be a problem. If we decided to do this tonight, we'd be stuck with this for a while.
Okay, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to make this motion, and I would like staff to help me with it at the end. I don't support any of the options. I would like to direct staff to paint temporary lines at the tennis courts until we are able... Where? At the community park tennis courts. Okay. And so that until we are able to look at and do public consultation on the community park master plan. And I would also like a part of that to be, I don't want to see any bookings. I want to see it first come, first serve. If there's tennis players on there.
Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, what I would suggest Council do is to adopt the two recommendations that are in the report as they stand and add a third one, and that as an interim measure, lines being painted in the community park tennis court area to accommodate up to 6 additional pickleball courts funded from council contingency.
Will somebody will you make that motion?
I want to clarify, no, I'm not going to support that because we were led to believe that it's already, the money already exists in the operations budget. So it's not out of council contingency.
Then just drop off the from council contingency.
Wait a minute. Would you repeat that motion, please? Would you repeat the motion?
Yep.
The third part, not the first two.
And that as an interim measure, lines being painted in the community park tennis court area to accommodate up to 6 additional pickleball courts. And as outlined in the report, the funding would come from other parks and recreation budgets.
Okay. You want to make that motion? You made the motion. You're seconding the motion?
I'll second it, but I'll speak to it.
All right, you can speak to it.
Did you mention that there are only going to be 6 courts? I believe they've asked for 8.
If I may, Your Worship, there's already 2 courts there, so this would be up to 6.
But I don't know whether they'd have to be redesigned. I'm not just so sure. Maybe we could ask whoever's in. Mr. Cunningham, is it? Could you tell us whether the 2 present courts would fit in, or do we need 8 new ones?
You'd need 8 new ones because the 2 that are on there are just across the net. So those 2 would possibly stay, and there would be 8 additional ones. I was talking to somebody in the Parks Board this morning. I don't know if I'm at liberty to say or not, but he told me that if the council decides tonight to go ahead with the painting of these lines, he is okay with it until the master community plan comes into effect. And if we get our designated courts when they're available, these 2 tennis courts are going to need to be resurfaced anyhow. Then they would go back to the tennis courts, the use of them there.
Thank you. So can we change that motion to have 8 additional courts?
It's up to council. Up to 8 is fine.
Well, I would suggest 8. Friendly amendment.
Okay. Councillor Powell, you made the motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the question I have, one of the things that has not been dealt with is how they're going to share the court. Because it's my understanding that if we put the pickleball there in the morning, then the 2 people who are playing tennis are going to be punted out. So I want to clarify that before we move on any further on this.
You'll answer that.
Okay, yes, sir. Come back. Why don't you stay there for a while and just relax?
Your Worship, I'm trying not to speak too often because I know I'm not supposed to speak once you start your agenda. we cohabitated with the tennis people before, because when we started on the tennis courts. We booked the tennis courts from 9 till I think it was 11. My memory's not that good, but we had them booked. It wasn't a problem with the two. At that time, there was 4 tennis people. They didn't have a problem. If it was a nice day like today, they were on the courts when we came down. They'd play from 8 till 9. They're only good for about 40, 50 minutes maybe, or they'll play after us. It's going to be really hard to cohabitate with tennis players because of the system that we play. We have different things going on every day, and some of them take 2 hours, some of them take an hour and a half. So it's going to be really hard to cohabitate with the tennis people from 9 till 12. But we managed it before when we started on those 2 tennis courts, and they didn't have a problem with it. I will stay here.
So don't go away. Stay there, please. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Since we are entertaining questions and feedback from the audience, I'm wondering if there's anyone here from the Aerosmith Tennis Club. Do you have any
You're
comments?
from the tennis club, sir? Is your name, are you Mr. Johnson? Okay. Would you mind letting Mr. No, you can stay there. Let Mr. Johnson come up. Just get the guy in the yellow
Let's
shirt.
work on
No, you move. Yellow shirt, move. All right, Mr. Johnson,
Perfect.
go ahead. But from your note that you just gave us, and we just received this, 20, 30 minutes ago, you're talking really about Springwood Park, are you not?
I am.
So if we leave Springwood Park alone, you're okay?
Exactly.
Okay.
I'll leave here if I can get that assurance. And but I also wanted to assure the pickleball people that we have no claims on the community court at the beach. We would like to see the tennis lines still there, because if they are eliminated for some reason, that could put additional pressure on the Springwood courts. So as long as those tennis lines stay there, and Mr. Cunningham has already said that there are no reason for them to come up to the Springwood courts, then I think we can coexist quite nicely.
Okay, just to resume where we're at, folks, because we have to move on, and I'm going to give council more opportunity to talk. But I gather now that the Springwood tennis courts are protected for the tennis players. We're looking at 8 extra courts for the pickleball players down in the community park, and I hear that the pickleball players are saying they're willing to play ball, pardon the pun, with the tennis folk. They're not going to abolish them or kick them out of the tennis court. I did have a lady come to see me last Thursday afternoon with coffee with the mayor, and she was concerned about the fact that she does play tennis in the community park on a regular basis, and she was hoping that whatever decision we would make, that they wouldn't be obliterated from the community park and prevented from playing tennis. And that's a concern that I had, but I'm hearing you say that won't be a problem.
It will be a problem from 9 till 12, Monday to Friday only. And I know the ladies that you're talking about. There's 2 of them. They come down
At 8.
Pardon?
They come down at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, we're not there at 8 o'clock. We don't start play till 9 o'clock. And those 2 ladies don't play very often. We have had dealings with them in the past, and when they come, when we were playing there before, we never had any problem. We got along really, really well with them.
Okay. Any more discussion on the motion? That's what we're going to do now, because we've narrowed it down. So, Councillor Oates?
So, just for clarity, to your chair, if it's okay, to the tennis club, if we approve the painting of the additional lines in the community park tonight, that won't cause you any angst, and you'll be able to work out your logistical issues with the pickleball people on a daily basis when you get there. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, yes. Now, the tennis club we have no reservations for the community club. It's a drop-in session for the public only. So we have no authority down there at all to speak of. So to answer your question, same as pickleball people, yeah. Right.
Sorry. painting the lines there doesn't give any group an enhanced right to that surface. That's not that right, so we're clear on that. What we're doing is providing an opportunity, and it still comes on the first come, first served basis. I don't want to paint some lines and create a war that shows up on the front page of the news.
You know, there's the pickleball wars. Any further questions on the motion? Is it on the motion? Councillor Patterson, on the motion.
Okay, it's a little bit off, but it has to be asked. Sorry. And it's directed towards our CAO because we went through extensive budget deliberations. And we're going to be looking at the community park master plan and that. So the tennis courts down at the community park, they were slated in the next 5 years to be refinished. That's correct? Mr. CAO?
I believe that's correct, yes.
So my question is, if we are to be looking at a review of the community parks master plan in 2016, how long a time period process do you anticipate that taking?
The review of the community park master plan would probably be less than a year. From that, if you follow the old plan, which envisions the tennis courts being relocated out of the park, that's really a budget issue, because what they were envisioning is that if you take them out of the community park, you would put them somewhere else. So where's the funding going to come from that somewhere else? That's something that council will have to decide. Could be anywhere from 0 to however many years.
Thank you. So just my little follow-up is that there's lots of different sports organizations that contribute money to their sport in this community. And the Aerosmith Tennis Club did $30,000 in that area for the Springwood lines and such, and that there isn't any guarantee that the courts will be there in 2 years based on the community park master plan. So at this point in time, we're only going to be giving temporary. So that's what I wanted to point out.
Are we ready to call the vote? All right. All those in favor of the motion that's and with the additional motion that Councillor, Mrs. Comas, am I doing something? No? All right. All those in favor. Yeah, there's 3 points on the motion. The 2 points that you have in front of you.